connections or what you're open to, because your life is still murky or coming into shape. Or maybe you just don't have as many responsibilities. I don't know. And then as you get older, you've kind of settled in to who you are a bit more, for better or for worse. Not that people can't make drastic changes later in life, plenty do, but most people, like, they kind of reach a bit of a status quo in terms of what they do with their life, how they spend their time. And I think that takes a toll on friendship, because it's more like, oh, is my friend going to fit into my life now? Does my friend, if my friend is doing this thing, is it going to, like, benefit me in some way or something? Like, I don't know, I think back to, like, do you remember when we'd sell comics on the street?
Yes.
And you and I were, like, really into it, and there was this moment where, what was her name? Jessica Abel, Matt Adams' wife. Yes. We were like, hey, I want to come and sell comics on the street with us. And she was like, didn't pay me $1 million.
She did not say that, but she said that in that note.
There was so much disdain.
That no is still resounding.
Right? The no is still resounding for me too. And
I thought I was the only one.
I mean, first of all, I would probably still sell comics on the street. Like, I still find it interesting. But I do think my enthusiasm for activities like that was different when I was younger, because it was sort of like, this could turn into anything. What's going to happen? I have this free time. I'm sort of getting money from all these different sources, and maybe this will be the thing. And I still have some of that, but I do think it's shifted. The feeling that something could come of it is sort of dwindling. Like, it'll be nice to do, but nothing's gonna. Right. Like, I wouldn't have the same kind of curiosity or, like I was saying, aspiration in these activities. Yeah, I think it's like a combination of stuff. It's like being married, but it's also where you are with your career, how you've sort of figured out how to make a living, and how you need to kind of then devote your time to specific things. But it's not even about, like, just relationships or money, because I think back to, like, my friendship with my friend Kevin, who I'm still very close to. But there was something about the early years of our friendship where I was like, oh, I'm learning about whiskey for the first time. I'm going to try a cigar. I'm going to get into comedy. Like, he was introducing me to all these things.
Cold plunges.
And I feel like I haven't had that kind of relationship with someone in a long time, where you meet someone and suddenly you're like, you throw yourself into their world, because you're like, maybe this could be part of who I become. Now it's like, this is who I am. I'm interested in who you are and whatever differences you have from me. But I'm not going to give myself over to it.
Yeah, you're going to stay in your lane.
Well, you've already become a person, so there's no need for these people.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. I feel like there's...
I think that we actually have to keep becoming a person, even in our old age.
You do, and you should, but it's...
But this is interesting about your friend Kevin. My friend Sadie, when we were in high school, I feel like we invented each other and we invented ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, if I had not met Sadie, I don't know what would have become of me. I would be nobody. Like, there was a third space every time we saw each other, and we would create things. Like, we just gave each other so much confidence and, like, empowered each other to, like, we were like a whole gang, but just two people. And in a way, it's like I sort of reject people because I'm like, you'll never be like Sadie. And it wasn't even Sadie; it was the chemistry of Sadie and I together.
Well, maybe that's just maybe they're just stages in life.
Yeah, I mean,
when you're young, you play with kids in the playground, and then you play outside, and then you get married and are in a loveless relationship for the next 40 years. And if you're a lesbian, you still have to do that. You have to marry a guy.
Well, I do feel like my friendship with Melly, to me, is... I feel really happy that it has evolved the way it has, because she, to me, was kind of like your Sadie, like someone when we met when we were a little bit older. We met when I was like 19, and she was 24. But like, we definitely did that thing of like influencing each other and kind of becoming a third person and exploring New York and kind of settling into our New York lives. But I feel like we've evolved over the years where we still, like, there's certain things that I talk to her about that I can't talk to anyone else about. You know, she comes to me with her problems, and our problems, we spend a lot of time talking about physical ailments now, as you do when you're older. Like, I do think there is something, like I was saying, to be about when you have a primary person, whether you're like legally married or not, if you have somebody, I mean, you guys have kind of become this for each other in a way. I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but like, if you have a problem, isn't Tony the first person you call? Like,
yes.
Don't you have like a go-to?
Yeah, but I try to pick my battles. I don't go on with every little thing.
Whereas I do feel like when we were younger, it was maybe you'd have like maybe a best friend who got it immediately, but it did feel a bit more spread out in terms of like.
Yeah, it's true. When you're younger, yes, friendship is a commodity that you kind of take for granted.
There was nothing more valuable to me in the world than a best friend as a child. An ally against, you know, the horrors of middle school. Like, it's about allyship, I think, more than anything, at least at that age.
Us and them.
Yeah, it's very us and them. I
yeah.
think it's ultimately an us and them thing.
Because, like, school is, like,
it's brutal.
Yeah, it's, like, psychologically violent.
Yeah.
I mean, at least psychologically, like, physically violent, too, but, like the brutality of just, like, the cruelty of other kids. And adulthood is that way, too.
Ostracization is traumatizing, and the idea is that if you had a best friend, that would never happen to you. And that's, I guess, kind of what then one of the ideas behind marriage is.
Yeah.
It's like, this person is never gonna be, if I'm in this relationship, I'm never gonna feel that. But it's not true, because
I think everybody should get divorced, because all these married people are so annoying to me.
Tell me what's annoying to you about married people.
What did you say, Gabrielle?
Karen and John live upstairs from me, and they rarely fight, and they're a very solid, loving couple.
They are.
And when I hang out with them, I'm sure they go home and discuss me, or they're like a united front. Like, there's two people plus the third marriage. There's just like, they have this allyship. Not meaning to, but it's like against, like, all the married people are like a whole society unto themselves, and which I am not really ever going to be part of.
Yeah.
So all you married people sort of cast me into my singleness all by myself, which is very, I mean, like, it's fine to be single when you're around a bunch of other single people, but like being single surrounded by married people is like,
Does it feel like being in middle school and you're around a bunch of people with best friends? And you don't have.
Yes. There's nobody that you have your allyship because.
Yeah.
Whereas I have no interest in taking anybody's husband.
Right.
But I do like.
That sounds like some straight nonsense, but okay.
She's straight.
But I do like hanging out with men. And most men are married
and
at this age.
Their wives don't like it.
Well,
their wives are threatened.
My girlfriend didn't like it when I was hanging out with Gabrielle.
A whole other, that's a unique
It's
relationship
another
there.
It's another relationship.
It's not your average male-female friendship. Yeah, no,
I
it
used
is.
to be jealous of Sadie all the time when we were friends. Like, I think jealousy.
I felt jealous. I've actually felt jealous of people that Melly was hanging out with in the past. Well, I remember there was a moment, this was like 10 years ago, and Melly's dad was having a 70th birthday, and they were going to go on a cruise. And there was like some moment where Melly, like we had another mutual friend, and I don't remember how this exactly happened, but it was something like where Melly was like, oh yeah, and maybe you'll come on the cruise to this other friend. And I was like, because Melly was single at the time, and I was like, you would invite someone else, like another friend, to go on the cruise before me? And I got really upset, and I was like, well, I can go on the cruise. And I did end up going on the cruise. And
Did that other person go on the cruise too?
No. I think that person couldn't or whatever. But I do remember this moment, the feeling this very possessive sense of like, I'm the number one slot. Like, if Melly's gonna spend this like silly, ridiculous week with somebody doing this thing, it needs to be me.
Jealousy in friendships can be, or betrayal in friendships, it can be devastating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is that?
Should we bring in an expert?
Yes, Tony, are you an expert of friendship?
No, but there's somebody waiting in the hallway. Special guest, and it's Beyonce. She's right outside. She wants to talk.
Let's keep her waiting.
We totally should.
I feel like I've seen like a spate of articles recently about adult friendship breakups, which also fits into this theme because when you're a kid, I guess it's in middle school you have breakups, but then I feel like between the ages of maybe like 16 to 35, you just drift away from people. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but it seems to me that it's less that you would have an official breakup, your life would just change. You'd go away to college, you'd start a new job, you'd start dating someone, like for whatever reason, those 2 decades, you kind of drift in and out of friendships and it's less tragic. But then when you become an adult, your friendships become much more regimented. It's like, oh, well, we have like coffee or lunch every couple of months, or we, do this together. And if it's gonna stop happening, there's sometimes this awkward conversation that happens. I've never really had that, but that's what these articles seem to be talking about, these like friendship breakups.
That makes me cringe so hard.
I know, and
it just hurt.
I think like in your 20s, don't you? I think you're like, well, this person is pretty toxic. I hung out with them for like 10 years, but now I'm like, I don't have to anymore. Like, this is not good. And then you just become wise and smart and older and be like, okay, this is just kind of unhealthy. Or this person's just really boring. And I was hanging out with them for like other reasons that I didn't even understand why I was hanging out with them.
Yeah.
And they were actually probably weren't really good friends. They just asked me for money and...
Or maybe you just have different interests.
Yeah, and then you're like, yeah, we have different interests, and that's okay. And then you just like, but I don't know, but I've never really had this kind of. Actually, I've had a falling.
Well.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, tell
I have actually had a falling out of just that type, but never.
Where there was a conversation, like we were gonna stop.
Yeah, it's like, and then the guy was like, "Don't come back to this town again." Like it was a Western or something. Are you saying that there's a conversation where you meet in a cafe in Paris, and then you're like, we can't be friends anymore because of this, and then you just will talk about it, like a normal.
Well, now I'm doubting what I said, but I feel like I've seen articles about this. I'm trying to think if I've had this experience, but it feels like that type of experience is more likely to happen when you're older.
I think the cringe thing about it for me is that, like, with a loving relationship, like a physical romantic relationship, that is obviously a thing. But like breaking up with a friendship is acknowledging that it is a thing, that it is a bond, like a common bond, and those sort of things they thrive on not, like you are not acknowledging. You just build the bond. You don't say, we're really good friends, aren't we? We need each other. Like we just like so then when you end it like in an official way, it's like it's saying the thing that you don't want to, that you didn't say the whole time.
Yeah.
What about an ex-lover that you would say that I would never be your friend? Like you're like, thank God that's over. I don't ever want to hang out with you again.
I have said that. When they're like, we can still be friends, I'd love to say, no, we can't.
Well, I feel like some people do have this sense of like, oh, well, if you tell me, of course I'll tell my spouse. Like,
yeah.
And that seems really unfair to me. Like, I've had friends say to me like, "Oh, please don't tell anybody," and that should be like across the board.
Almond breast milk.
Wait, is it almond milk?
Yeah. I made
What
it
is that?
myself. I strained it through a cheesecloth.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
There's
I'll
no.
try it.
There's no seed oils.
Do you want some honey?
I don't know. I feel pretty happy that we're still the amount of close that we are. Maybe not as close as we've been in the past, but like I feel like we're always gonna have comics that ties us. We're always gonna want to sit and draw together. I can't imagine.
And we have militant, strided, angry feminism.
Okay. Who's the angrier feminist?
Gabrielle.
Really?
Obviously.
No question there. She's the one that has to date men. Obviously,
Yeah.
she's got more anger.
She doesn't have to date men.
Well, she should follow her desire.
Do you,
I actually-
do you,
I am
do you
more
find
like-
men attractive, Gabrielle?
Yeah.
I find men repulsive.
I know, because you are one.
Poor Tony.
I mean, not just because you are one, but they're also, people are pretty repulsive. It's just like,
Yeah, I'm actually like lately. I'm like I think women smell gross. I don't know why.
it's just that like sexual attraction just kind of
Yeah.
subverts all the disgustingness of it. Like a person can smell bad, but you like it if you're attracted to them.
Actually, like I was hanging out with Kaya a couple months ago. And she's like, I went on a Tinder date or some date, and then she's like, the guy showed up at that drawing session, and he smelled like shit. It's just like, wow, that's weird. Like this is what's offered to you.
It does seem to be a challenge for women to date, and this is kind of cliche, but it seems to be backed by anecdotal evidence.
Do you
That's
feel
right.
like me becoming a parent has obviously changed the amount of time we've spent together, the things we do? Do you think it's changed my personality, like in terms of hanging out? When we do hang out, if it's less frequent, is it different? Like,
Yeah, it happens to everybody, every childbearing woman.
mm-hmm.
You guys just grow up and become like dauntingly mature, and I'm just.
So, well, that's interesting to me because I guess I feel like I have more responsibility, or maybe I spend less time thinking about some things, but I don't know if I would have said I became more mature.
Yeah, you guys gain something, and I mean I don't envy having a child, but I do envy whatever it is you guys seem to know that I don't know.
About like just like different life stages. Like, oh, I went to college. I had my first kiss. I bought a house. I got married. I have a child. My kid went off to college. Now, if you're not part of that sort of normal life stage thing, you're like, wow, I'm out of the race. I'm not even in the game.
Yeah.
Like, I have nothing. I'm not going to be a grandma or grandpa or transpa.
Yeah, I feel like that outsider too, which I don't know, is like I chose it and I wouldn't choose any other way, but yeah, there's definitely like that, like a lot, like all the think pieces sort of, like all the media think pieces very much sort of exclude me in a way, unless
that's
Yeah.
interesting.
like
All these things you feel like don't like. You
Yeah,
have
they don't
to kind
really
of suddenly
apply
not.
to me, and there is like sort of
Yeah.
like kind of like a like it's understandable. You can't include everybody all
Right.
the time, but it's also there's still like
Yeah.
this, like resentment.
It's like homeowner,
Yeah.
grad school, my first Nobel Prize, my second Nobel Prize.
Also, like I could see how we get together, our group of women cartoonists, and me and Lauren and Liana and Julia are all like excited to talk about things to do with children because it's something you're like struggling with or whatever, and then you might feel excluded or bored.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like going to like a car swap meeting and everybody's like, I just put in this 356 Hemi, and you're like, I don't care. It means nothing to me.
But I mean, I also always recognize, like, having kids and being a female and living in this society and having to have like a career and all, like it's like virtually impossible, and there's like no support at all. And so I can recognize like when you guys get together, like it's far and few between, and this is like your chance to sort of like.
A big part of that too is that So it's not that parents necessarily want to hang out with other parents because they have it in common. Parents want to hang out with parents because ideally then their children are playing and you don't have to deal with them. So that's like, it's a way to be social, because you can't just pay for a babysitter all the time.
No.
So if you want to be social with somebody and they have children, then you can go to their house and the children can play and you can talk to adults, and that's nice.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to find those people that you connect with.
Yeah.
So when I get together with those cartoonists, it's like a relief because we already have this friendship or this thing in common, which is cartooning. And then our children can be doing something, like when we went to Lauren's house and Sylvia and Robbie were playing. Like, that's just so nice because... and like, well, I'll meet other parents like at Robbie's school or whatever, and some can turn out to be great friends, but a lot of the time it's like you then get together and you don't connect. So it's like,
it's amazing how some people can just connect and it's like magic, and other people just, you meet somebody and you're just like, we have nothing to say to each other. Like,
but I guess what I wanted to say wasn't is that it's not just that you want to talk about children, but you want you want to be in a scenario where the child is entertained.
Yeah, I think it's like...
Well, sometimes I also do get bored when we all hang out and you all talk about dating men. And I'm like, yes, that's shitty. And I'm sure there's other things that other people feel excluded about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like that the time for talking about dating men is kind of past. Like, when I talk about, like, a man that I date, I can tell everybody's like, we're over that. Like, nobody's dating men anymore except for you, Gabrielle.
Like, I don't know. Even, like, I feel like sometimes we get together and people bemoan the inequality between mother and father, which is not my problem.
Yeah, that seems... Yeah, every time I hear about that...
I mean, I do sympathize. But
I also sympathize, but it's not my problem either.
A father of a child at Robbie's school. And I was like, oh, like, what's your daughter doing for after school next year? And he was like, I don't know. My wife does that. She's good at admin.
She's good. Maybe she is.
I'm sure she is, and I'm sure he's like a very involved father and does stuff. But like, you don't even know where your child's gonna be for half the day.
My parents didn't really care about that. Like, you just said that. I want to make sure that the kids are entertained. Like, my parents never cared about us at all of being entertained. They just brought us to places like the construction site, the tobacco field, then we would just get. There was nothing that was childproof. We just get injured all the time, and then we would get yelled at for getting injured. Like this whole coddling, like this new childhood.
That's true, but nowadays. Yeah. Ariel and all of these guys, they are compelled. If they're gonna just bring the kid to the construction site, they will be socially ostracized. Like, there's a lot of pressure.
Who is gonna ostracize you?
There's a lot of the other parents, and you need the other parents. The whole society. There is a lot of pressure to be a helicopter parent. Like,
well, also in those olden days of like, how old are you?
November 20th, 1969. So I was like a flower child.
Yeah, so in those olden days, it is true that women's involvement in the workforce was different.
Yeah.
And they were doing more child care. And so now more women are working.
But I mean, not necessarily. Like, Tony's parents both worked.
We were like latchkey kids. We would come home and then like just get in fights with kids in the neighborhood and junkyard dogs and stuff.
Like,
and come home to dinner.
And I think
because we were hungry.
Like, throughout history too, like, women often worked unless the husband was making enough money to support them.
Yeah, so this is like the anti-Rachel Cusk, like, working,
like, ideally
actual person
in the past,
conversation.
Women would be housewives, and like Betty Friedan in the 50s wrote this book about like how actually we're all miserable as housewives. But that's also like ideal, like.
That's so true.
Assuming the man can afford to.
Yeah.
To buy.
My mom had to do all the housework on the weekends, and then also do all the cooking, and worked.
So
which
she
my
was-
dad just like
yeah.
came home and like, what's for dinner?
So she was like a modern day feminist.
Yeah, she worked like 89.
She was a modern day slave.
But it was she wouldn't think otherwise. 'Cause
Well,
we
I mean,
would-
I don't want to judge. She might
No.
have been happy with her life. I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't know. But we would like, hey mom, let me wash the dishes. She's like, no, that's my job. Like she would be angry. Like it was so built into her that that's her job. And if she didn't do it right, and her job was also to marry her daughters away. It's translated into like, did your daughter get married? No, you say, I married my daughter. Like that's your job to
Wow,
find,
that's
to get
intense.
a social connection that you are in charge of.
Yeah.
Like, and if it doesn't happen, you're a failure. And none of the kids in my family.
Did
are
your
married.
mom
My two-
look for?
Wait, no one
for-
got married?
No one got married.
So sad for
Yeah.
your mom.
Did she?
It's
like,
weird because she's always like berate. It's like, haven't you found? Well, what about that skinny girl? Is it?
Was that me? Wait, didn't one of your relatives say you could just knock somebody?
Yeah,
up?
she did. One of my aunts was like, just knock somebody up and just have a kid. Don't even get married. We were
But
talking
I mean,
about
like, yeah, women were doing it all then, and they're still doing it all. Like, they're like feminism is kind of, it's not working. Fact is that women seem, like, from what I see, women seem to be unhappy with the situation, and men seem to be actually quite happy with the situation.
Right.
So it's like
Right.
something is not balanced. Like, both should be happy, or at least both should be.
But these are also mostly
Yeah.
women artists who I'm talking to. So
Right.
there's also like, I do think there's, you know, and the problem with being an artist, actually Vanessa had a great comic about this recently. Did you see that comic she
I saw
Put
it.
on
Or should be
Instagram
just
about-
1 minute.
Well, she just needs 1 minute to write down an idea.
Yeah.
I really related to that, and it
It's
turns
really
you
good.
into like a screaming monster because you're just like, okay, you can't when you're like a creative person, like ideas come to you and you don't want to lose them, and that's the hardest part about being a parent is you don't have that freedom to like go and work on something whenever you want. There's been so many times in my life where I've been like trying to write down an idea while Robbie's like literally like just like pulling on my body, like putting his hands in my face, and it makes you go crazy.
Me and Gabrielle had this conversation about going to Weinstein's house and her daughter. This is about like the power of children over their parents. The adult was negotiating with his child. Like, maybe 1 minute, maybe 5 minutes, maybe, well, let's go now.
It's
or like,
it's constant
it's like,
negotiation.
that's a new thing.
Yeah.
That thing, my parents would be like, you just wouldn't even think of asking, like, what are we going to have for dinner? Well, what do you want? Like, it was just what we had.
Yes, gentle parenting, there's some issues
It's
there.
a new thing, though.
It's a new thing.
Yeah.
There's, I
So
would
it's
say, actually, when, you know, not to get too much into parenting, there is a thing about like the counter will and how the most important part of your relationship with your child is actually letting them know that you're the boss, you're in control, and what you decide will make them safe and happy. And then they trust you and want to follow what you say. So
Oh, I'm sorry I made you stand like this.
you don't want to disrupt that
that
that dynamic. That dynamic is really valuable. But that said, being like a, you know, authoritarian dictator with your child isn't good either.
I mean, I wish I had gentle parents. That makes a lot of sense. That's something that I actually wanted, and I didn't. And the idea of like parental like hypocrisy, which I got like, oh, like my dad's smoking, and he's like, well, you can't do this. It's just like, this is crazy. Like, how are these children turning out that were gently parented? Because we've seen some examples, right, in Gen Zoomers.
They seem sweet. They seem
Yeah.
nice.
Oh my god, they seem totally freaked out.
So
They're
gentle.
so anxious.
They're anxious. Why are
They're
they
anxious because they, I mean, I don't know, but aren't a lot of Zoomers were raised by Gen X, so I don't know. I feel like gentle parenting is happening now.
Walking down the street and there's like this mom with her kid and there's like that voice and she's talking directly at the kid and her voice is like above any other like street chatter and she's like giving directions, and to me it's just like I just find it irritating.
It's so humiliating.
What
to be a
is
parent.
that?
Because you often are forced to take your relationship that you have in the
I know.
house that makes sense
Yes.
out in public, and
Yeah.
it doesn't translate, and you know you're a spectacle. Do you think they're speaking like in a louder voice?
They're speaking in a louder voice. They enunciate more. They're doing something that's kind of different. Like,
Well,
I do actually
And that's nothing wrong with
think
it.
that there is a phenomenon, and I actually
Yeah.
see dads doing this.
Dads
I
are doing
to see dads do this more often than moms, where you can
Performative.
tell that the parent is thinking a lot about what the adults around them are thinking. Like, it just feels like they're having two conversations at once.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, one is to the child and one is to the other adults, and it's very cringe.
It is, and I find myself doing that. Like, I'll be walking down the street and thinking I'm making a funny anecdote, and like sort of speaking louder, hoping that other people would like. I'm sort of presenting my voice,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, why am I doing that?
Yeah,
a friend,
I
like
do that
Layla,
too.
one time said, "Tony, you're just talking to other people. You're
Oh
not
my
talking
god,
to
that's
me."
so.
But like that, you love something that you're willing to humiliate yourself for it. Like, I think that is like the bigger thing, like, and what makes you bigger and stronger. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's less important what people think than the guidance of your child. Like,
Or the wrangling of your child.
like just being like able to focus your like attention and love on this one thing.
Like, why is the child like the protagonist?
Well, I assume you're mostly talking about women artists here, or can you give an example of
I am talking
of a
specific-
male artist?
I
that has done
cannot.
this?
No, I'm talking
Right,
about
because the woman's life is consumed by her child because the man's not doing shit. So that's what's happening in those early years. I mean, for the first 3 years, you don't have childcare because it doesn't exist. I mean, it can for a lot of money, but your child isn't able to go to public school yet.
Yeah, the pressure.
And you still want to. I mean, I didn't personally do much of this because, well, for multiple reasons, which I can get into later. But like, I do understand why women do, because they want to keep creating, and it's literally all consuming for those first 3 years.
I
Nothing
agree with
else is
that,
happening.
yeah.
Like, nothing else is happening. But beyond that, I don't know. But I also don't. I agree with you. I don't find it that interesting.
It's not interesting.
Like, I don't. And Gabrielle and I were talking about this earlier another day, because there's kind of no conflict. It's more just sort of like kids say the darndest things, or it's like, look at this gaffe. It's not. There's nothing for the average reader to be like, how did you get through this experience, and how is it going to help me get through my tangential
As me
experience?
as a man or another woman.
It doesn't matter who. Like,
yeah,
it's
it doesn't
just
matter
not. It's there's no the art often doesn't have a point beyond look at this moment.
What?
Sometimes it can.
Can I
Yeah.
say something about
Yes.
this too? That's I think is very important. Is that like in literature in general, I think it's only very recently that like women writers and men writers, it was just not serious literature if it was about children.
No.
Like there were some women that would write about children, namely Alice Munro, and then apparently she was neglecting her children while she was writing.
You've done a lot more.
Yeah, more than the neglect was.
No, I mean, it was
Neglect.
No, I think it was pretty severe neglect, but like she was doing great literature about being a mom, but that was unprecedented and very like. And then like Rachel Cusk was really a breakthrough. Or like the Italian woman.
Elena Ferrante.
This
Yes.
is so recent, like
Yeah.
before, like just like
But Gabrielle,
20
I'm
years
saying
ago,
that-
it wasn't like
Yeah.
if you wanted to be a serious writer, you just didn't write
But
about
those
children.
stories are what
Yes,
Ariel.
but it takes time to get good at something and to like gain your voice. Like, well, this is just
Right.
beginning. Like, this is just like people are just putting their foot in the water. Like, they're just
Right.
starting out and they're experimenting. They can't be expected to be just like perfectly fully formed geniuses. That's something they're only just feeling out and just starting out.
There is a book about being a new mother that I thought was brilliant, that I really loved. It's called Afterbirth by Elisa Albert. And it is about the just kind of raw, primal horror show of what it is to care for an infant. But it's also somehow not a negative book. It is a book full of like love and intensity, but that was a book that I really related to, and I don't know, but I would imagine it would be interesting to somebody else, because it's kind of about any person being faced with a completely new, terrifying situation. after birth. It's not. I mean,
Right.
someone does give birth
Yeah.
in the book, but it's mostly from
Yes.
the perspective of a woman
Yeah.
caring for a go with me the kid's 1.5,
Right.
which is something that ostensibly a man could be doing.
That's true.
So it shouldn't
Sorry.
exclude you, but but you're also not a parent. This is something I have noticed about becoming a parent, that it feels like a difference in like my personality or the way I function in the world, which is that suddenly stories of like child abuse feel way more intense. Just like I used to be just sort of interested in everything horrible. So I'd see like an article about something horrible that people did and I would like read it. And now it feels, and I don't know if this will change as Robbie gets older, but now it feels too, I don't know, there's something like, something has shifted and I can't read about that stuff anymore without feeling really, really upset.
Just like you just arrived
Yeah.
and you're just like this, you're nothing but just like this pound of flesh, and like immediately you're just like treated badly. Of course, like you're gonna
They
be
just have
messed
no
It's the saddest thing.
agency. Like they can't help. They can't do anything. Like they're so at the mercy of
Yeah.
adults.
Yeah, it was great reading about your childhood in the comics. That was like such a big impression on me. Okay, let's talk about our original story. When I met Ariel, I was like 21,
Yeah.
22. She was 14, and we
Wow.
met at Berkeley University. Yeah, we were going to the figure drawing club
Oh, okay.
at the university, and so I assumed that she was going to university. And she's like, "I'm in 6th grade."
What?
No, I think I was actually in 10th grade because I had published Awkward and was hanging out with Lisa Anamato.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that would have been 10th grade.
Okay, I just remembered that.
So it was 15.
Okay, yeah, okay, 15. Yeah, but I'd already read a lot of your comic at the comic book store, and I'd already been like,
If you read it, you buy it, okay?
I was
The artist needs to get paid.
I was that kid, yeah, sorry. But I was just like, when I read it, I was like, whoa, you could just do this. Like, there's very, when you see something and you're like, you could just do this with art, like, that I had that feeling. So I was like, I was really blown away.
Yeah, I remember I was at your house and it was like, who's this? And it's like, oh, it's my friend Ariel. And it was like, I read and I was like, this is so intense and so crazy being in the mind of, like, this art is so good
visceral.
that I was just like, wow, I couldn't take it. I was just like, wow. And then like the same thing, like you could actually do this. Like you can just go there and do. You could be like Chantal Ackerman and write some letters home or something like that.
You can't compare me to that. It's embarrassing.
It was like, draw me, draw you, only
Okay.
figures were naked, yes.
I do have a memory of when that summer, the summer of my freshman year, I took like an art class at CCAC, like the art college in the East Bay, and we drew naked people, and it was like a woman first and a naked model, and I remember one of like the other teenage boys coming in that day and kind of looking at his friend like,
Yep.
I just felt like you shouldn't be here.
You just remembered it until now.
And thought about it for the rest of my life.
And you now, 80 years later, an anecdote.
Felt assaulted by that smirk for the rest of my life.
It's amazing, like, just like Jessica's no, there's certain words
Yeah.
that just, like, and gestures that just stick with you forever. And
Yeah.
and things that we've probably said to other people are sticking forever, too. Dash Shaw said to me recently that, like, several years ago, I was reading a book, and neither of us remember what book it was, and I said that I loved the book, and he said, there was a picture of the woman, the writer, on the back, and he said, "Do you think you love the book because the writer looks like you a little bit?" And apparently I'd made this look, and I was like, no, and made him feel really bad for even suggesting that. And then later he's like, "Why is that wrong to suggest that? She's not bad looking or anything." But I don't remember any of that. But it disturbed Dash, and he brought it up.
It's basically saying, he was sort of saying in so many words, I'm only thinking about your physical features. This woman has your physical features. You must be interested in her physical features. And it was kind of like a denying of your brain in that moment. It was
I'm fine with Dash denying my brain.
Do you think he's cute?
He is cute.
He is adorable. But I know he respects my work. It's not like I think that he's reducing me to
I'm just trying to think why that would maybe be offensive.
Yeah,
I feel like because it's like a decentering.
Yeah.
We kind of would see each other at comic book conventions, but we weren't really friends. We became. I mean, this is my memory, Gabrielle.
Oh yeah, there was some drama.
My memory drama.
What?
Yeah, there was some serious drama. You wrote me a letter, which was thrilling to me.
What?
You don't remember the drama?
No.
Amanda Padilla, and there was a bit of a feud.
But what did she say?
I think she was saying stuff about how you were compromising your friends' identities or something like that.
Oh, she was okay. Yes, she might have. Now it's kind of coming back. So she was kind of the mindset you shouldn't be writing autobiographical work that talks about other people.
Yeah, but she was just finding her own voice and stuff, Amanda was actually also about your age, I think. I was always hanging out with younger women.
I feel like we actually, Gabrielle and I became friends when I was in college. Not until I was in college, and I would come back for the summer, and you were living in the Mission District.
Yeah.
Should we switch? And then I would go to your apartment in San Francisco, and we would draw together, and I would spend the night, and I have just a lot of memories of that time. I think I did, to be honest, have a little crush on you, but I wasn't I didn't think that I knew that you were straight, but there was I think, yeah, I do remember that a little bit.
Gabrielle tried to make out with one of her lady roommates once.
I did. I tried it once. I didn't.
I think you mentioned that, and I was like, "This is never gonna happen." But
Stick on.
But I remember, staying over there. We would stay up really late drawing, and then in the morning, you would make us these sandwiches with this Mexican cheese that kind of squeaked in your teeth, avocado.
I was somebody else.
Yeah, it was just really nice, and I felt really. It was so nice to me to feel like I had this friend that was separate from separate from whatever I was trying to do at college or my high school friends. It just felt like a very pure friendship.
Yeah.
That it was based entirely around comics, and there was no gossiping about other people because we didn't really have any people in common other than sort of the comics industry. But
did you guys go to Comic-Con together or no?
We went to.
We were both there at the same time. We would end up going, and that's when we had to stay at Jeff Mason's place. We would crash on hotel rooms together, and
I remember one time we were all hanging out at this youth hostel. I think you guys must. And
Point Loma.
Maybe, yeah, I think so. And there was Robin Chapman was there, and who else was there? There's a bunch of women cartoonists, and there was not so many women cartoonists back then. It was
it really felt. We really felt like anomalies in the group. And
was Jessica Abel in that, or who else?
No, this was more under. Jessica was kind of a star. We were kind of a little more underground. But I remember it was Robin Chapman. It was a handful of women, which was rare. We were like, wow, all these women cartoonists together.
That's amazing.
And we all started talking about whether we wanted to have kids or not.
Wow.
And
I don't remember this at all.
It was a pro, and I remember Robin being resolutely against it.
And she still doesn't have kids, right?
Yeah, and then there was another woman who said that she did. I can't remember your position at the time. I think you said you did. Oh, I think
I always wanted to have kids.
Yeah,
I would have said yes.
I actually remember the same conversation with, years later, with Alison Bechtel and Lauren Weinstein and Jessica Abel. And again, Lauren was like, yes, I want to have kids. She hadn't had kids then. And Jessica was like, yes, I want to have kids. And Allison was like, well, it's too late for me or whatever. And I was like, no. And they did have kids.
So we would see each other at conventions. I would go stay with her when I was in college. And then I was still in college when you moved to New York.
Yes.
So we both kind of grew up in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And then I moved to New York, and then you moved to New York.
Yeah.
And then we were like both in LA at the same time.
Yeah.
And then we both moved back to New York around the same time.
Because of boyfriends and girlfriends.
But we've always kind of been in the same place, and we've always drawn together in all these locations.
I've always sort of taken that for granted. I've always been like, Ariel will always be nearby. And
Right?
now you're right down the street.
Yeah, and we've always kind of, and when Gabrielle was in Beacon, I would go and stay at her place up there. Like, we've just kind of always been very much in each other's...
By accident, too. Like, we weren't like, okay, what city are we going to live in?
We've always been kind of in the same city, and we've always incorporated ourselves into each other's kind of domestic lives because we just like to sit and draw all day. So it's like, Gabrielle and I would not, like, meet for lunch.
No.
Like, that just wouldn't happen.
Right.
It's always going to happen at each other's houses where we sit and draw. And so we've really kind of developed a relationship that I feel like incorporates each other's home lives because of that.
Ariel, do you have other friends that you're like, I can only draw with you, we're not going to meet for lunch? Or are there other people that you're like, I just draw with this other person? Is anybody else like that?
Well, there's the girls' comics, you know, the group of women cartoonists, but that's, you know, with Gabrielle.
Do you draw with Lauren?
No, I don't have have an independent relationship with Lauren, but I love spending time with her, you know, when we're all together.
But it's not just the drawing, though; it's the conversation.
Well, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, Gabrielle is a great conversation. Actually, to get back to my crush, I remember having a. This is now kind of embarrassing, but I feel like this is what you want the podcast to be, the revealing of I remember spending the night at your place in the Mission District and having this dream where I was like, yes, I love you. It's the conversations we have. Because even back then, I remember feeling like you went to a very deep place very quickly. You know,
with talking.
Well, yeah, with conversation. That you kind of cut to the core. Things became philosophical very quickly, and that was not something I shared with a lot of other friends, and that it was. It was something I really valued, that we could sit and draw side by side and just talk and talk and talk because the conversation would go in these interesting directions. So it's not obviously, just that we draw, but...
Yeah, that's actually what turned me on about Gabrielle. I met her at that same Mission Street house. And it just and we just went out and we just talking. It was I like talking to this person. Just I could hear myself, I could hear her, and I could hear other things that I normally wouldn't be talking about.
I'm very hard pressed to find people that are willing to get philosophical with me. I think that's I'm kind of lonely because not a lot of people like to talk about they don't like to go deep.
You know, I mean, I don't really like to use those words philosophical. It's just are you an adult having a conversation with another adult about stuff that's important?
Part of the reason it happened was because we didn't come from similar social scenes or have a shared school. We didn't really know that many. I mean, we kind of would sometimes talk about people in the comics world, but there wasn't really a chance for gossip because we didn't share those people. So we kind of immediately just went to talking about art and stuff like that. Well, my whole life I've had just a series of weird, mysterious symptoms that half are real and half I've created out of my own neuroses. And now that I'm in my mid-40s, I'm like, oh, it must be perimenopause, which is actually kind of helpful because rather than immediately going to, oh, it's this serious disease, I can be like, it's perimenopause, and it's probably neither. It's probably literally nothing. But
and thinking about it is going to cause it or something.
No, that was kind of my experience with this play, which I felt very on edge watching it. This is causing my heart to race, this is causing all these anxiety symptoms. But then after I left the play, I was also wow, that play was really interesting or astute or made these great observations about pain and how it can manifest or what it means in your conception of yourself. And did end up thinking it was a very good play, but also feel haunted by it, and sometimes just lines from it will run through my head and cause me anxiety.
What line?
Just you hear like people describing their pain, and so if I basically like if I feel a pain, then I might hear this character in the play being like, "It's a hellfire," and I'm like, "Oh my god!" Like, so stuff like that. So the play I think is really good, but it also, I don't know, has caused me stress. Well, also there was like that book Yoga.
Oh yes,
which
that was a
my God.
So many people were raving about it. And I was like, oh, I want to read this book, and I started reading it. Really enjoying, really interesting. And when I realized that he was about to have a mental breakdown, I started having those reactions again. Like my heart was racing. I was like sweating, reading. I was like, I can't finish this book right now. Maybe at another point in time, I can, but right now, I have to choose to put this aside because it's causing me too much stress again.
Wow.
Which is sad to me because I want to be able to experience.
Is that when he had that breakdown at the ashram or whatever?
Yeah.
And then he had to leave or something. I thought that's interesting. It wasn't that intense for me, but it was very intense for you. Yeah.
I didn't know where it was going to lead. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah. Maybe I would have finished it, but I just...
Oh, you wouldn't have liked the end.
I started to feel like it was something that was not going to help me feel at peace. And even though I felt intensely interested and curious, I had to make the mature decision not to risk it pushing me down a pathway I didn't want to go.
But you did go see that play. What's that play again that you were talking about?
Well, I actually went to the play having no idea what it was about.
What? Okay.
Because I love Annie Baker,
right.
And we had gotten these free tickets, and it's very expensive to see a play, so I was like, oh, yay. And it was about 15 minutes in where I was like, oh my god, this play is about my worst nightmare. Like,
wow.
But I stuck it out, and I am glad I saw it. But
did you have an aisle seat in case you get an anxiety attack so that you could just?
But you didn't know.
I didn't know. I'm in the middle of the theater, and all of a sudden they're talking about like chronic Lyme disease. But I'm also, here's the thing, those things that cause me anxiety, I'm also like more interested in that than anything else in the world. So it's like there's these warring parts of my brain. One part is like, oh my god, they're finally talking about all the things that you fear and are interested in. And then the other part is like, run.
Yeah, those
save
things
yourself.
seem more scary than death. Like just
Yeah.
to be in like deep pain and like just missing your life but not dying. Like
I got like that New York Times article, which I didn't read because I read the headline and I was like, that's enough for me. But about a woman who was like in chronic pain and was like, didn't want to be resuscitated.
My dad was like that in his final hours. He was just like, why are we even doing this?
Oh my god.
Why do we have to go through this?
I don't know, like the idea that you can just check out is gotta like.
Well, we feel angry at people that do that, like Kurt Cobain and all those.
Yeah, well, yeah, we do feel kind of betrayed when people do that.
I mean, yeah, I do think that's an interesting thing to mention Kurt Cobain because, like, you know, sure, he was like a drug addict.
He was murdered by his wife.
And he was murdered by Courtney Love, and there's all these things, but, like, what gets lost in that, I think, sometimes is that he, like, supposedly suffered from this, like, severe chronic stomach pain that was, like, debilitating.
Yeah, like when I have a tummy ache, then the whole world is just like fucked up.
Like they're like, I prefer psychic pain rather than physical pain. I guess you can go either
well,
way.
I think at a certain point they become one and the same. Like I think when you're, or at least physical pain becomes psychic pain. I don't know. And psychic pain does become physical too, actually. It's like, I feel like at my lowest psychic pain moments, I have felt weird pain, like just my whole body has felt in pain. Yeah. And I know that it's...
Yeah.
My friend Dia said, like, I don't want to have children because of the pain. Probably the pain of gestation and childbirth and all of that.
My grandma was
and raising them. It's an interesting question, like, what does she actually mean by that? Probably meant the first thing, probably just like the pain of your body being ripped open by another body being inside of it.
My grandma was like, I never got my ears pierced because I'm a baby about the pain. And she had 4 kids.
Yeah.
Poor kids.
But here we have a person that gave birth to a man-child, and how was it? Was it painful?
It was painful.
But I will say this about it. It was not... The other extreme pain I've experienced in my life is my shoulder used to come out of its socket all the time. And that is extremely painful. But it's also painful because it's scary. Because you see your bone sticking out where it shouldn't be.
Do you have to have somebody set it again?
You don't know if you're going to get it back in yourself or someone else has to push it back in. And so you're panicked about that. So the fear is what's adding to the pain. The thing about childbirth is, yes, it was painful, but it wasn't scary because you know that this is what's expected. So for me, the pain of childbirth, like the physical pain, was not what made it difficult. What made it difficult for me more was the exhaustion. But I had like a very long labor.
Did you have an epidural?
No. And
Why?
I don't think I would have needed one because I wasn't, even though the contractions are very painful, it's not, I don't even remember the pain of pushing, honestly. Like, I was just so exhausted that was the thing that was consuming me. But,
and that you're asked to do this pushing, that you have to do this work.
Well, I do have this really clear memory in the middle of giving birth, of just like thinking to myself, I don't want to do this. I'd like to leave now.
Right.
I'm done. Can I go?
No, you don't have a choice.
But I do think, when people talk about birth being painful, it is, but I don't think it's painful in the same way that like something being wrong with you is painful. Because I think the fear of something being wrong is exacerbating the pain, making it of a different nature.
That's interesting. Because it's true. When I know what the pain is, then it's not as bad. But like
totally,
if I'm like, oh, this could be like kidney failure or something.
Well, it's like even with I pulled a muscle in my back like a week and a half ago, and for the first couple days, it was painful, and it was probably the most painful because it was right after when I did it. But I didn't really think about it because I was like, oh, it's going to go away. It's fine. And then when it kind of lingered, it's pretty much better now, so everything's fine. But like when it was lingering is when I started to be like, oh my God, what if I've like permanently injured myself? It's going to be here forever. And then all of a sudden the pain got so much worse because it was now attached. There was now this fear of it never going away or being like, what did I actually do? Like what happened? Like, do I need to go to the doctor? I don't want to go to the doctor. Like all these thoughts.
Should I take 6 or 7 OxyContins?
But literally with Advil, like how much Advil can I take? Is it my stomach gonna bleed? Like
your liver's gonna be destroyed.
Whereas like in the beginning when it was actually more physically painful, but I wasn't worried about it, I didn't really think about it. I was kind of like, oh, this sucks, but whatever. So.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me, and I went to one of these minute clinics, and they're like, I think my spleen exploded. And they're like, no, nothing happened to you. You just have a muscle.
Your spleen.
No, it didn't. I thought that because I'm so hypochondriac, I was like, there's something terribly wrong with me. Like, no, you just stretched in a weird way and you're an old man and that's what happened.
You were okay.
I'm fine, yeah. Okay. But I just wanted to hear that. And that just felt much better. It's like, I have some pain and now I understand what it is. Yeah. And I could just walk around with this pain without thinking I'm going to die tomorrow.
Well, this is why I have to balance going to the doctor, because it's like, on the one hand, sometimes I'll have a mysterious pain. I'll go to the doctor, they'll be like, oh, that's this, it's nothing to worry about, and then the pain vanishes.
Yeah, exactly.
But other times, you go to the doctor, and they're like, oh, well, we should check that out, because that's their job, they have to. So
we have to stick
we
it
should
to,
check that out, we gotta do this
rough.
test, we gotta you've come to me, I have to look into it, we're gonna look into it.
Yeah, it's almost like they have
and
to
then it increases, because you're like, oh my God, they're doing the cancer test, like, oh my God, like, what is it? And like, you've made it worse. So that's why I'm constantly like, should I go to the doctor and maybe get quick relief, or should I go to the doctor and maybe make it way worse? I don't know.
Took me to places I'd never been. She brought me the tide. She taught me to swim. Big brown eyes that turned to gold. she came.